Can you hear me now?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, I hope you all can hear me now. All right, so we'll get started again. Can somebody just give me a thumbs up in chat and let me know if you can hear me? We will start over. Apologies for the tech glitch. Okay, all right. Thanks, Patrali. Appreciate that. Let's get started again. So, all right, I don't think I had said much. I'll just reshare what I was saying. And good to know that there are a lot of people in the room. So, we will be re energized as we are restarting this session. My name is Arjun. I'm the founder at Pivot. And what we do at Pivot is help people make different types of career transitions. Um, Before I dive into the topic, I want to start by sharing why we started Pivot. So, when Pivot started in 2021, our focus was on helping people make drastic type of transitions, especially when they were changing their domain or their industries, right? And that meant significant 180-degree shifts a lot of the times. That was a prime time for many people to reconsider their career trajectory because of COVID. And we wanted to be there for folks who really were thinking about those 180-degree shifts. But over a period of time, what we realized is that there are not just one or two definitions of career change, meaning changing your domain or changing your industry. um, there are many different types of flavors and seasons of career change that we have realized since the last, especially 3 years or so. So, our own definition of career change has evolved over this period, and I want to dive a little bit into like why specifically it has changed. So earlier, because of COVID, a lot of people started rethinking their career trajectories. I mean, it was sort of an existential crisis at the time for many people suffering through health issues and life and death issues, and they wanted to really reconsider whether careers were fulfilling, whether they felt passionate, whether they were creating the right type of impact through their work. All important things, but they were triggered mostly by COVID and how it seemed like an existential crisis at that time for many people. Simultaneously, a lot of people were also working remotely at that time because of COVID, and that allowed us more time to think about other things, right? Like in terms of not just our 9 to 5 jobs, but even within the 9 to 5, when we were working from home, we were interacting with our families, our friends, much more. So it really made us think about work life balance. Those things have shifted again since 2023, and companies have asked employees to return to the workplace and work on site. And now we are seeing in the last 3 4 years that people still want to achieve different types of ambitions. It's not like they have gone back to being comfortable in their little comfort zone. They still want to be ambitious, they still want to make transitions, but they are not always 180-degree. They're not always triggered by an existential crisis per se, but more by um, stepwise improvements that they want to make in their careers. All of that is to say, earlier when Pivot first started, a lot of focus was on helping people make fairly drastic 180-degree kind of career shifts, because that's where we were seeing a lot of people demanding help and support. Today, we see approximately, I would say, 30 to 40% of such scenarios where people are still thinking about 180-degree career shifts, leaving what they have been familiar with in their prior careers and moving on to something completely new. But most of the times people are not making 180-degree shifts. Most of the times they're making incremental shifts, which means that they might be sometimes looking for a level up in their career, going from IC to a manager role within the same field. Sometimes they are changing their domain but not their industry, or vice versa. They're changing their industry but not their domain. Sometimes it could also be other types of inflection points wherein you are somebody who has taken a bit of a gap. You've done a bit of freelancing or side projects during that time frame, but now you want to come back into the workforce as a full-time professional. So you had a little bit of a gap, now you're returning to the workforce. That's another type of career change, because you will face quite a bit of bias in the job market, especially in the current job market, from companies, because they have a plethora of talent options to hire from. um, and then there's always people changing their countries, going from India to another country, or returning to India from a different country, given the anti-immigration norms that we are seeing across the Western nations. And sometimes people starting something of their own after a 9 to 5 job, or returning to a full-time role after being a founder or being an entrepreneur. So these are various types of career shifts that we are seeing today, and they all have their own, I would say, pitfalls. They have their own ways and strategies of maximizing your chances to achieve that goal. That's one of the biggest learnings that we have had. There's no one size fit all, and in 2026 you can't have a playbook for every type of career shift. It varies, right? But still, just to kind of give people something that they can use as a structured approach, we will discuss what the most successful stepwise roadmap has been for most of the pivoters we have worked with, especially the ones who are making these incremental shifts, not shifts which are completely 180-degree, have no relation to what you're doing today, right? So that's the first thing that I wanted to talk about, is how career shift definition and the types of career changes people are going through has changed over a period of time. I also feel the other thing that has happened in the last 3 years is how AI has resulted in almost like a necessity for many working professionals to consider a career change. Um, in the sense, if you think about some of the tools that have been coming out over the last couple of months, in fact, they have created a lot of panic and fear in the job market around whether companies will continue to hire those specific professionals. For example, software engineers, for example, content writers, right? And there are other such professions as well. So and some of that panic is justified, even though all the business leaders and government leaders are trying to comfort us because that's their job. But at the same time, we know that not all of it is hunky dory. Yes, AI tools are going to empower us to do more and better work, but at the same time, they are resulting in quite a bit of higher productivity and fewer employees required to accomplish the same tasks, which means that earlier, if you needed 10 people to do that job, today you need 3 people or 4 people. So the hiring trends are indicating that some of the legacy jobs, especially in engineering uh, and customer service, as well as marketing, at least these 3 areas have been impacted heavily. And there are more other areas to come in almost every field where we think the trend will continue. So while we don't need to panic, but we do need to adapt, right? We do need to understand that our jobs are not always going to be secure, and we need to have a plan B so that we can de-risk our financial situation and our job security. And so in such environments, what we are seeing is a lot of people are not waiting to get laid off or waiting to be obviated or replaced by AI tools. They are thinking ahead. They are thinking about their future, not just for the next 1 year, but the next 5 years, the next 10 years, right? And in such circumstances, many of the times they're reevaluating their career paths from the perspective of switching again domains, their industries, level in the organization, um, picking up new skills, right? So there are a lot of different types of shifts that we are noticing because of how fast AI has been evolving. And I think the last thing that I would say is also impacting the landscape of career shifts in general is the geopolitical landscape, right? The geopolitical landscape has also changed drastically. I won't spend too much time on this because I think out of all the factors that I'm sharing, this is probably the smallest one impacting career shifts. But it is causing quite a bit of uncertainty, especially for people who want to migrate to a different country, or they have already migrated and are unsure about their future in that country. So a lot of times, if you think about certain jobs that exist in US, they don't really properly exist in a country like India. For example, I myself worked in US for the first about 8 years of my career, and that was a booming industry in US, while in India it was less than one tenth the size of the industry in US. And there were less than, I would say, 100 people working in India in that particular industry that I was in. So people had to, people in such situations have to think about how they are going to adapt in new environments, in new geopolitical landscapes. So there might be some of you who are thinking about, transitioning to a different country, or you are already in a, international market, and you are unsure about your future there. So we are seeing a lot of people come to us to figure out how they should move ahead in their career in such situations, especially when opportunities are not similar or equal in different regions, right? So yeah, I think these are some of the factors which have changed how people are thinking about career shift. I think we were very nascent in 2021 and 2022 in the career shift landscape, and today it's becoming sort of more mature. People are realizing that there are more ways to shift. So that's point one, right? The other thing that we are seeing is a lot more appetite in the industry for career shifters to be able to succeed. Earlier, I would say there was less appetite relative to today, because companies did not know how to identify the right talent from different industries. They could not identify the overlapping skill sets, because they were so focused on the gaps. Today, we are seeing, for example, there's somebody who has worked in engineering and wants to actually get into product management. It's much easier relative to 2021, 2022, right? There are other such transitions. For example, we are seeing sales and customer success transitions are becoming much more common than they used to be, right? We are seeing, for example, if there is sales and marketing related transitions, they are becoming much more common. So there are different types of transitions that used to be much harder earlier, and have greater accepted greater appetite in the market from companies today, because the market has matured and companies are able to now identify overlaps in skill set much better, especially when they are looking for transferable skills, as well as they know that, they can't always hire the person who has a lot of deep domain knowledge, because some of these domains are very new. When we think about AI, it's a 3-year old or 2-year old kind of a domain. When we think about space tech or certain other fields here, they're all very new. So they know that they have to look for people from adjacent profiles as well. So we are seeing a lot of good appetite in different types of transitions, which organically lend themselves to a new type of role, right? All right. Now let's talk about why are people most likely to make a career shift today, as opposed to, like I said earlier, which was very much COVID driven, existential crisis, and work from home factor driven. Today's career shifts are being driven much more from a day to day practical reality perspective. The number one thing that we are seeing for most people to consider career shift is growing faster in their careers. And what that means is primarily new learning and development opportunities, as well as ideally team management, managerial responsibilities too. So many people have been doing the same things over and over, and they're seeing around them that markets and workplace is changing and evolving very rapidly. um, AI again, and a lot of other factors that I've already discussed are causing disruption in the workplace. And if you are static, if you don't feel that you're going to get impacted by these factors, you are at a risk for sure. If not now, maybe in a couple of years. But the good thing is a lot of professionals are already realizing that themselves, and they are taking action to upskill themselves. Now the question here becomes what to upskill in and how to actually make sure that it will drive high ROI. which we will cover in a few minutes. But that's the first reason, right? The second reason that we are seeing people consider a shift is because they feel their future prospects are not very secure in their current job, because they feel that job is going to be replaced or by AI, or it's going to uh, not be as popular as it is today, because there's changing work requirements from companies. Like if you think about large tech companies, they have let go of more than, about, I would say, 2 million people just in the US, right? Globally, the number is probably over 5 million in the last 2 to 3 years. And a lot of people will say, oh, I was making good money, and I was getting promotions, I was doing well in my job, so let me just continue in the same path even though I've gotten laid off. But they're realizing there was a reason they got laid off. A lot of times companies did not actually need so many people, so they let them go. And people want to make sure that they don't repeat the same mistake again, and face job insecurity and diminishing future prospects. So they are pivoting, they are finding different ways to align themselves with high growth roles, which are going to provide a better and more secure future prospects, right? So that's the second reason that we are seeing people make a shift. I think the third most popular reason that we have seen is also people have more awareness today of what kind of roles are out there, and which roles will align better with their personality, their interests, their skills, right? All of those things which help them feel more aligned overall with the day to day responsibility. So people are getting sort of fed up of being burnt out or working in a role which they don't really enjoy. And they want to, while there's no perfect job that you will always be happy in, but they do want to make more of an effort to align themselves with something that gives them better fulfillment on their key priorities. So if that is sometimes like better work-life balance, or you're starting, let's say, a family, you need to be more at home to help out. We are seeing both men and women changing careers for those reasons, right? Sometimes people are trying to focus more on their health. There's a health, there are a lot of different health epidemics that are going on right now. In the last few years, you might go to a hospital and you see they're all overcrowded. The reason I'm sharing that is a lot of people are actually finally trying to prioritize their health, and that means stepping back from work, not completely but partially. And so they look for alternate options that can allow them to do that, meaning, for example, work from home, part-time work, freelancing, those kind of things. So people are looking for better alignment with their jobs and greater fulfillment. So yeah, these are the most common reasons. Obviously there are other reasons as well, but you should be very clear about the reason why you are making a shift, because if you are not clear about your reason, your fuel to execute on that transition is going to run out very quickly. If you don't have a strong why behind, hey, this is the reason that I need to make this shift, you're not going to be able to tackle a lot of the challenges that you will face during the transition. So you need that motivation, you need a strong why to keep you going despite the hurdles, right? um, the next thing that I wanted to touch upon is, probably something that many of you are here for today, which is what are some of the strategies and structured roadmaps that we have invented at Pivot and have helped now thousands of people using those strategies to accomplish their goals, right? So we have worked, like I said, with close to 10,000 professionals so far. We have a fairly high success rate, close to, I would say, it hovers between 85 to 90%. It can vary, obviously, depending on specific industries or specific demographics, if we look into those. But overarchingly, we have a fairly high success rate, and the reason for that is, I would say, to a large extent, this particular stepwise roadmap that we came up with quite some time back, but we have fine-tuned it rigorously over a period of time to make it as impactful, as high ROI as possible, right? So there are multiple factors that impact the career change outcomes today. There's not just any one factor. Yes, they vary in degree of importance. There are certain factors that matter more, there are certain that matter less. But like I was saying earlier, there is no one size fit all. For some people, one factor would take precedence. For other people, another factor would take precedence depending on your background, your goals, and all of that. So, what I'm going to share is something which, in my experience, has worked for the largest majority of people, because that's hopefully going to be the most helpful. But by no means am I prescribing this as something that is a remedy or a strategy that works in 100% of the cases. You will need to adapt it and improvise as you go. So let's dive in though, right? Like let's talk about this roadmap, because I'm quite sure that many of you have joined the session primarily to understand how it all works. So the first thing that I always talk about in career change is about knowing yourself and knowing the market, right? The job market. If you dive in blindly into the career change phenomenon just by looking at social media trends and looking within your circle and saying, oh, I like this other job that one of my friends is doing, and she or he speaks very highly of that job and is enjoying it, let me go into that direction as well. In fact, I spoke with somebody today who himself had uh, decided to make a career shift. So we have not worked with this person yet, but he had decided to make a career shift based on what he saw one of his friends do, and that friend had a very different background, but he was able to successfully pivot into certain type of career path. And this person also thought that they would be able to do it as well, but they had a very different background compared to their friend, so it was much harder to make that pivot. And that's not, I mean, that's just an example from today, but I've heard such stories time and time again, where people follow social media trends or look at their friends and relatives career trajectories, get influenced by that. And it's okay, we are all humans, we all learn and perceive things based on what others are doing. Not, we are not islands and kind of working in silo. But at the same time, the first and most important thing is to know yourself. How do you know yourself? So generally you guys might have heard about the framework of ikigai, which is a Japanese framework. It's a very popular book that's written about ikigai. Ikigai is defined as a framework that helps you find your purpose in life. And from a professional or work standpoint, primarily, they talk about a couple of factors in there which they believe are the most impactful. We have used that as an inspiration, but we have built our own framework to understand yourself better, wherein we focus on three factors: your interests, your skills, and your biggest priorities at this stage, right? Now, there would be other factors as well, but these three are the most important ones. You might say, okay, what about my overall background? What about my experience? Yes, those are all factors you might need to take into account. But usually, if you focus on interest, skills, and priorities, you are able to really dig deep into things that you enjoy working on, things that you are good at, and that people can expect you to outperform on versus other folks in the industry. And also, priorities are things that are most important to you at this stage in your career, right? So these three typically help you gain more self-awareness about what kind of profiles would suit you at this stage in your career, right? So I would definitely advise looking at these three factors. If you want a slightly more sophisticated model, you can add more factors, but definitely these. But simultaneously, I talked about knowing the market. Now that's the part that many people miss. They, I would say probably 50-60% of people know that they have to think about, okay, what do I like, what am I good at, what are my key priorities. But many people just blindly go with what they have identified as their ambition based on these three factors. They don't look at the job market, the external factors. So you have to look at what are the current hiring trends, where is hiring actually happening in terms of roles, and companies, right? There is very there's a lot of good data available online with regard to current hiring trends. You just have to look at, I would say, GPT or Claude or any of these Gen AI platforms, and type a good prompt around, what are the current hiring trends in XYZ space, which is the field that you might be targeting, right? And you will understand, okay, this is the current trend, this is where hiring is happening, or it's stagnating, or it's even contracting, right? You should understand those trends. Sometimes the trends would be more in regard with skill requirement evolution, right? Companies are drastically requiring very different types of skills from their workforces. For example, we are seeing the IT services firms are requiring less and less of project management, or the scrum management kind of folks, which still are required. I'm not saying they're not, but in much less numbers, while they are requiring more and more people who have expertise within digital transformation, AI transformation kind of work, right? And by the way, I know I'm taking quite a few examples of tech, but there are several examples that I will give for non-tech as well. Like, we are also seeing a skill evolution definitely in content marketing. A lot of times earlier it was more about the writing skills itself. Today, yes, writing is still important, but it's not the core skill anymore that's required for marketers. It's more about your judgment, your taste in what's good content, what's not good content, um, or how good you are at storytelling, where you build the story and the brand, as opposed to AI. AI is, can write very, but it can't build the brand on its own. So, so these are the kind of trends that people need to be aware of before they get clarity on what is the right role and industry for them, right? Um, the second factor that we like to focus on in this roadmap is centered around skills, actually. I've talked about skills from a hiring trend perspective, but more than hiring trend, ultimately, anytime you're making a shift, whether it's incremental shift, meaning you're making a slight change in your career profile, going from perhaps one industry to another industry, but in the same exact domain, or you might be making a slightly more drastic shift where you are changing your domain, right? But you're in the same industry. So any of these cases require a reevaluation of your skill alignment with the target role. The reason that is needed is twofold. One is there's usually going to be some gap in your knowledge because you're venturing into a new field, right? So it's but obvious. You will likely figure out what those gaps are by, again, talking to industry experts, doing certain research on your own, perhaps taking a high level introductory course to that subject, or watching YouTube videos. So you will be able to identify what those gaps are. um, but the mistake that I see most people make here is assuming that a course is going to be enough for resulting in a successful career shift, right? Almost, I would say, 7 out of or 8 out of 10 people who come to us expect that. And I think it's much, it results in much confusion and doubts when people start applying and don't see any results in terms of callbacks, in terms of offers, because they thought that they would succeed with the certification or course, but they don't. So the biggest mistake is that when it comes to upskilling, the thing that results in actual tangible outcomes is when you gain some sort of practical exposure, some experience, which may not necessarily be full-time role, because obviously that is a chicken or the egg. If you need experience to get a full-time role, but you can't get a you can't get experience without a full-time role, then how do you actually meet either of the conditions? So we are not talking about full-time role experience. You can get experience through multiple different ways today, whether it's using AI to build a product, a workflow, a deck for pitching to somebody, or let's say a marketing collateral. So you can build a portfolio through different types of AI platforms today. The other thing you can do if you want more real world experience is do some sort of an internship, or do freelance project. We have seen multiple people in their 20s and even in their 30s. Sometimes when they're making drastic shifts, they're okay with taking a pay cut because they're doing this on the side, right? They're not doing this full time. They might have a full time job already. They're doing this on the side, so they're okay with doing it for even sometimes pro bono without charging anything, because they are looking to learn um, in a practical driven environment rather than just a theoretical driven environment. So so it's come to a place today where anybody who is looking to upskill should not feel like they don't have options to gain practical exposure. Today there are many ways. There are other ways also, right, like which I haven't discussed due to paucity of time, but there are multiple ways, believe me, that we have seen people gain that practical exposure. So that's the first part of skills. The other part of skills is you need to understand that you're going to be competing with people who are more experienced than you in that particular field anytime you're making a shift, right? You should take that as a given. Don't think that, okay, I have taken a course, hence I am at par or maybe better because I have better aptitude, or I'm more skilled in this area. If you have less experience, even if you have better aptitude or better skills than more experienced people, you'll still face a bias in the job market because most companies look at experience still more than actually your skill level, right? So in that regard, you have to figure out your unique positioning in the job market. Now this is again a part which we see a lot of people missing out on. They don't think about how their profile looks, not just in silo meaning just based on what you have done in your career. It's it's compared versus many other professionals who have also applied for that role. So it's always a relative uh, scenario that your resume or your profile is being considered based on. So you should look at it from that lens and think about, okay, I don't have more experience than most other professionals in this field, perhaps because I'm transitioning. But what are the aspects that I can add more value to this company compared to an average candidate who might be applying to this job? And there, I'll give you one example. So, a couple of months ago, we worked with somebody who was transitioning from shipping industry, meaning transportation logistics industry, to finance industry, right? Very different fields. Within finance, he specifically wanted to work ideally in investment banking, private equity, venture capital, that kind of a transition. Now, this is actually, to be very honest, one of the most drastic transitions that we have worked on. Um, but the reason I'm sharing this is because it will highlight the point that I'm trying to make, which is that if on the surface level it's almost impossible to think of a transition like this, right? But the reason we were able to succeed in this particular case is we identified what this person's competitive advantage, their uniqueness of their prior experience and their skill set was compared to other professionals who might have been applying to the investment banking, private equity kind of roles. And what helped us really crack this was the fact that this person had deep domain knowledge of the shipping industry, of the logistics and transportation industry. So we primarily focused on those investment banking or financial services firms that had a deep clientele base in that industry, in the transportation industry, right? So because this person was able to leverage their subject matter expertise within the industry, they found actually a pretty good role that gave them very lucky, but also I would say like a far-reaching entry into a new career space, which is finance. And the main reason that worked is because this person was not competing or trying to compete with other experienced bankers and finance professionals. They realized that there are going to be certain skills which are critical from a finance standpoint. They upskilled in that, right? Simultaneously, when they positioned their profile in their job applications, it wasn't that, hey, look, I have all these great finance skills. It was more in regard with, hey, I have the basic fundamental finance skills, and I have certifications to prove that. But where I know I can do better than most other candidates is in knowing what are the nuances of this particular industry, what are the seasonalities, what are the different growth trajectories and levers, and all the other business nuances that help them create a more unique profile versus most other candidates. So this is a common thing which works well, but very uncommon in terms of people themselves thinking like I should position my profile uniquely versus other candidates, right? So yeah, I think that's the skills part. The third module that we focus on in this roadmap is networking. Now, today I can't emphasize enough the importance of networking, because the job markets are crowded and the job boards that people are applying on are also extremely crowded. And what that means is, earlier, let's say if there were 100 200 people, maximum 300 people applying to a job opening, today there are 500 to 600 people applying to the same openings, right? So the competition has doubled or tripled in many cases, right? So we need to ensure that your visibility in such a market is not compromised, right? Earlier, if you had a 1% probability, today you have a 0.2 or 0.3% probability of hearing back, due to no fault of your own. It's just a crowdedness of the job market. So in such scenarios, it is imperative that you think about job search outside of the job board as well. I'm not saying don't apply on job boards, because yes, you can still get opportunities on the job board. um, I would say probably 30 to 40% of people who work with us do still land opportunities through job boards, but almost 50% land opportunities primarily through networking. So in networking, unfortunately, there's a lot of generic, low ROI, fluffy advice that goes around on internet, especially on social media. Lot of it is, here are 5 templates that you can use to reach out to people on LinkedIn and get 2 job offers every week, and it's a blatant lie, right? Like, who's getting 2 job offers every week using those generic templates? I don't think anybody is. If everybody was landing so many jobs right now, we would not see so many people struggling in the job market, and such a crowded job market that we have seen over the last 3 years. So clearly, those things are just being marketed and advertised to serve a purpose for the person who is spreading that lie. But we need to see beyond that lie to understand what actually works from a networking perspective. And what we have seen after doing a lot of experimentation in networking is that cold outreach results in lower ROI. When you reach out to strangers and primarily depend on that as your core networking strategy, it does not work for majority of people, right? Why does it not work? Because it's very easy to do. People are writing all these messages on ChatGPT and other AI tools and spamming people on LinkedIn. And now, I'm not saying that we have never advised people to do that. We have, and we still would say that you should. But there are two big factors to keep in mind here. One is, you should be reaching out to select number of people who you actually think are relevant for your outreach, not spamming generally anybody who works at that company, right? So if you're applying to a product management role, or let's say a marketing role, strategy ops roles, whatever it is, try to identify the people who actually work within that particular domain at your target company, and shortlist people who you feel are at the same level or perhaps one level up compared to where you are positioned today, right? And reach out to such people. Reach out to select number, and then when you're reaching out to them, don't just talk about what you need from them. Don't just ask for a favor. You have to talk about certain overlapping interests, right? So that is another area which we see is huge scope of improvement in a lot of the outreach that takes place. That people just focus on asking for help. They don't really talk much about, okay, this is why I'm reaching out to you, because I found something on your profile that made me think about my work in a different way. Or you're working on this really cool project that you talked about last week on LinkedIn, and I would love to know more about that project, right? It would be a good learning experience for me. Those kind of messages get much more responsive. But even then, like I said, cold outreach doesn't work as well, because if strangers get 10 messages a day, they just cannot apply to, cannot respond to all of those messages. So what works better is warm networking. Warm networking means primarily leveraging your network, and your network works better because those people know you, they trust you, they're established credibility. um, Sometimes people only focus on first degree connections, meaning your close friends, family, ex-colleagues, etc. But we have seen warm networking actually works best when you include second degree connections, meaning connections of your connections, right? Or joining certain communities where you can get ready access to people because you're being connected to them through that community. So in this case also, it's in a way a second degree connection. The common connection is the community itself. For example, Pivot is got 400 plus industry experts who are handpicked by us to join this community and provide direct mentorship, feedback, and support to our users. So when you join Pivot, you get access to these people, especially the ones who are working directly in your field, and you get direct feedback. But more importantly, you get more visibility in the job market. More and more people come to know that you're working in this particular profile, or you're looking to transition to XYZ field, and they're able to then circulate your profile within their companies, within their network, to drive more visibility. Obviously, not every single person would do it who you meet, but the people who have the right openings, or who do believe that you're a good fit for certain roles, they would. And that's what you need from networking, right? You need few people who believe in your skills and your capabilities to help you. You don't need 100 people paying the lip service but not really actually helping you. That's a waste of a lot of people's time and effort, especially yours. So that's the networking part. Then we go to the fourth thing, which is your job applications optimization and interview preparation. So here I won't spend a lot of time because I think this is the most talked about thing on internet, which is how do you optimize your resume, how do you optimize your LinkedIn profile. All I will say here is that there is good advice already out there, but there's also a lot of bad advice. So the good advice is the most simple ones, the simple tips, right? The simplest tips are, how do you, for example, format your resume based on ATS friendly formats, right? How do you ensure that you are showcasing achievements, not just responsibilities? Ensuring that you are quantitatively driven, meaning you are showing certain quantitative metrics, even if you are in a creative field or in a non-scientific field or non-mathematical field. Even then you should have certain quantitative impact to showcase on your resume. These are things that are talked about frequently. The only thing I would say is, make sure that you are customizing your resume and doing it not just based on the JDs that you're applying, but also based on, I would say, what the company requirements are, right? Company requirements, not just again from JD perspective, but where is the company today in its stage of business life cycle? Are they growing? Are they stagnating? Are they contracting? Are they entering in a new market? Are they launching a new product? Um, are they losing their best people, like having retention issues? So this is all available usually in public disclosure. Um, it will be wrapped with sugar coated words sometimes, but if you read beneath the surface, you will find the material you need to customize your job application, your resume accordingly. Same thing with LinkedIn. You have to follow the best practices that a lot of people talk about. We also help and talk a lot about like what are the LinkedIn best practices, so you can follow that. I don't want to take up too much of our time on that. The final thing I wanted to talk about is the actual job search strategy. So, in terms of job search strategy, we have seen that the default strategy for many people is to focus on volumes as opposed to conversion. So, what most people do is, because they are on platforms like LinkedIn, Naukri, IM Jobs, Indeed, etc., they have a plethora of job openings that they can see, and they just blindly and randomly apply to these. So we call that spray and pray. People have become slightly better since AI, and they are able to customize their job application, but they're still applying to a large number of jobs and not doing things which will actually help them convert. So I typically am in the camp of high conversion, low volume strategy, because that's a much more effective use of your time and effort compared to just applying and not hearing back from anybody. So what are these high conversion strategies? I think a lot of them we have already talked about, right? The first thing that we talked about, having a very clear reason why you're transitioning to a new role, and knowing how you, in terms of your interest, skills, and priorities, align well with the company's requirements, right? That profile positioning aspect that we talked about, how it uniquely compares you to other candidates in the market, all of that is one of the most important things that helps you convert more jobs into, I would say, callbacks and then interviews and then offers as well. The other thing that I think is a high conversion strategy is the warm networking that we talked about. So warm outreach, warm networking works way better in terms of conversion than cold networking and cold outreach. Um, the way you customize your job application rather than just depending on AI. If you do certain manual research on the company and customize based on that, we have seen much better outcomes using that strategy. So these are, I would say, the core pillars of a successful career shift in 2026. It's not all encompassing, it's not one size fit all. There are going to be times when you have to see how it is going for you specifically. Based on whatever I have shared, you should apply it, but then see how it's going for you. And if you feel like certain things need to be modified based on the feedback you're getting from experts in your industry or recruiters, hiring managers, then you should improvise accordingly, right? um, yeah, those are the key things that I was planning on discussing today. um, I just want to take a moment to see if there are any questions. Please feel free to put them in the chat here, and I will be taking them up. I see there's some good discussion that has happened. Leander has put down some comments, and I think Eric as well. Thank you for your comments. I think, Leander, your question is about, you're most worried that recent jobs, especially in creative, have many AI videographer roles and the reputed companies have lowered the pay. I've never used more AI tools. I'll actually show this comment as well. Never used more AI tools like LLM, especially in the last 3 years, to update my resume and experience and often career advice. But this has diluted creativity, especially copy. That's a very good point. I think AI definitely has its fair share of critics. There are a lot of people who are unsure whether AI will create only positive impact. um, Creative roles definitely have taken a hit in terms of job opportunities, in terms of how work gets done, because of AI. But I think it's too early to say, to be honest, like whether AI is all bad from the perspective of killing creativity. I think a lot of times, it might result in copy pasting same things, or very similar type of outputs, because if everybody is using AI, everybody is giving same prompts. Like for example, even for resume editing that we are talking about, a lot of people are customizing based on a prompt where they put in the JD, they put in the resume, and they say, please customize this to ensure that it gets shortlisted by ATS systems, based on keyword customization or something like that. Now, if everybody is giving the same kind of prompts for the same JD, it's hard to stick out. It's hard to get differentiated. So I completely agree that AI can be used for brainstorming really well, for also, I would say, minimizing the grunt work that somebody has to do, but it cannot replace human judgment right now. um, your own judgment in terms of what is high quality, which is what people call taste, right? So a lot of people are talking about how uh, one of the biggest skills of the current era is your own taste, your own judgment of what's good and what's not good in your particular field. And that means you still have some control over creativity and content, copy ideas as well. But yeah, I mean, the playing field is getting leveled a little bit because of AI. Thanks for pointing that out, Leander. The last thing that I want to share before we wrap up is, the psychological aspects of making a career shift in the current job market. Because, while I have focused primarily so far on, the tips and hacks and these strategies that work more on the professional front, but if you're not in the right mindset to implement a shift, it can be very challenging, especially in the current job market. And by mindset, I don't necessarily mean your bandwidth, right? A lot of times people consider their bandwidth as one of the key factors of whether they should take up a career shift right now or not. And that's a fair point. Like, people should think about that. Like, if you really are extremely busy, have 0 hours to spare in the week on implementing your shift, then you should likely wait until you have a little more bandwidth. But that is a fairly easy decision to make because people understand their bandwidth. What people don't really understand is the kind of mental resilience and fortitude that you need to go through a career shift, especially if you're making a slightly more drastic shift, or you're in a very competitive field where there are a lot of other people also applying to jobs. So I have seen there are certain things that can help you prepare better, from a psychological or mental resilience perspective, beforehand, rather than, coming to a breaking point, then taking some time off. So I think proactively preparing your psychological uh, resilience and mental resilience is a better strategy for uh, maximizing your success rate in career shifts. Now, what to do there? I think a couple of different things. Number one is expect that it's going to take some time, and it's not going to be an overnight phenomenon or something that will work in just 1 month. Now, if you have less of an expectation reality gap, chances are there will be fewer disappointments, and you will be ready to take on the challenges in a much more prepared manner, right? So just do a bit of research initially once you know which role you want to pivot to. uh, what is the competition like, what are the skill requirements like, and what is your gap versus those skills. So if you have a high level understanding, you will know, okay, this is the amount of time and effort that it might take me, right? And will be more realistic as opposed to just talking to a friend who has a very different background and has pivoted to that role. So yeah, I think that's number one. Minimize the expectation reality gap, um, especially when you are pivoting into different types of roles than you are in today. Second, I would say is, don't do this alone. I know it's easier, or it feels easier that you just have to do it all by yourself, because then you don't have to depend on anybody, you don't have to ask for help. You feel like more in control of the shift. But one thing that we have seen is both the success rate and your ability to tackle challenges enhances much more when you have certain both moral support and tangible professional support as well, right? So moral support is ideally, your family, your friends, people who you sort of hang out with on a day-to-day basis. That, I mean, is important, but it's not as important in my view as professional support. When I say professional support, you need help from people who have been there, done that, because that will reduce the amount of mistakes that you're going to make and build your confidence more, because you will know much more through these conversations with people who are aware of the pitfalls of the path that you are embarking on, right? And they can share those with you. So I would definitely recommend either working with a, even if, let's say, there is a mentor in your personal circle or professional circle who you have always looked up to, or he or she has been helpful to you in your past career, that's absolutely okay, right? As long as they know deeply about the path uh, that you want to take on. But it's sometimes not possible to find those people within your network, and that's where people get demoralized, saying, oh, I don't know anybody in my network, so what do I do? And that's why you have to go out to platforms like Pivot, or you have to go out to other platforms outside of Pivot as well, where you can find these kind of mentors. Sometimes you might need a career coach as well. Usually I have found career coaches to be very helpful when you are an absolute crossroads and completely unsure of what kind of next steps you need to take in your career, right? If you are also a senior professional who is just getting into a leadership level role, like you are at a, you know, mid to senior level, I would say like a director level or VP level person, and you're getting into a slightly more senior level role where you're managing very large teams, that's another use case that's really high fitting for career coaches. But apart from those circumstances, I've personally found that career coaches are slightly less effective compared to industry mentors. Again, I'm biased on this, so do your own research, right? I'm not saying that you should just trust me blindly on this, but typically career coaches would also, you know, charge you much more, and they work at a, you know, in a less goal oriented manner, right? It's more about getting you clarity on you know, what are you best at, what kind of work environments are best suited to you, and all of those things, right? So yeah, I mean, definitely get support. And the third thing that I think is going to be very critical for people to stay mentally resilient during a career shift is that they they are or they have a plan B, right? So have a plan B in case things don't work out. That might mean staying in your current job for a slightly extended period than you had anticipated. That could also mean, like, if you were planning to transition to something very drastically different than what you do today. Like, for example, there are a lot of people who come to us, they work in sales or customer success kind of roles, and they're working in a non-tech field, but they want to get into tech, they want to get into B2B SaaS or AI deep tech companies, but they don't really have much experience in tech, right? So it can be challenging, and I'm not saying it's impossible, because we've had many such professionals make these kind of pivots, but it's not 100% guaranteed. So you should have a plan B, because, you know, luck is also a factor. Sometimes you do everything right, but your luck is not with you. So you can't put all your eggs in one basket, and when it doesn't work out, then feel demoralized and, you know, scared about what to do next. And that can obviously cause a lot of mental pressure as well if you don't have a plan B. So always have a plan B, right? So yeah, I think yeah, these are some of the things which I have found to help people when they're embarking on these, you know, ambitious career transitions. I see a couple of questions here. I'll just try to take them up quickly, and then I think we can wrap this up. So I believe we have a question from Manish. I'm hesitant in getting somebody to recommend me. Seems like I'm taking a favor. How to avoid it? I'll show this question. Very good question, Manish. This is one of the most common questions that we get, especially from mid to senior career professionals, because a lot of times they have landed jobs, or they have, you know, grown in their careers seemingly without asking for help, right? But if you think about it, usually you have been provided help in your career, you just haven't asked for it perhaps before. um, for example, you might not have landed a job through a referral before, but you may have gotten a promotion because your manager thought you were good at it, right? You might have done well on a project because your teammate did great work, or your you know, your client or your boss provided very good context for you to be able to deliver good work, right? So these are all things that enable you to grow in your career, to do better work. And I'm sure even in your personal life, there are times where you might not have asked for help, but you were just given help without asking, right? Now, there is no shame in asking. The only difference in the question that you have shared, the only difference is, do I ask for help, or do I just hope that I get it without asking? And the thing is, if you don't ask, you're minimizing your chances of getting that help. You will need help. It's just a matter of how you get it, whether you ask or not. So, in my view, always ask. Now, how to reduce the, you know, let's say that's embarrassment, or sort of that ego factor that, hey, I have never asked anybody for help, why should I ask now? It's just that that's how life works. You give and take, right? It's not just about giving, you also have to take, because anytime you're giving, somebody else is taking it, right? Like if you're producing certain type of work for your client, they're taking it and applying it to improve their business in return for compensation. So life is about give and take. It's the most natural thing. Yes, if you are somebody who is only taking and not giving at all, then there are some people like that who just love to ask for help but never reciprocate. I'm sure you're not that kind of person since you asked this question. But yeah, I mean, you should just try to be a better person in that case. But in my view, today, nobody, no matter what level you are at, you should ask for help. The worst case scenarios, you'll get a no or you'll be ghosted. So what? You move on, right? Like life goes on. So you don't really need to dwell upon that. I hope that was helpful. I was a bit blunt about that one, but it's only because I know there are so many people who are hesitating to reach out for help, even though it can really open a lot of doors for them. Um, the other question I have here is from Leander. Again, thanks, Leander, for your participation. Appreciate it. Is it okay if I don't match every single point in the requirements, JD, especially when it comes to years of experience? Um, yes and no. So typically, I would say yes, because people have a good judgment. Like if somebody has said, we need someone with 10 plus years of experience and you have 8 or 9 years, sure, you can try as long as you have a good alignment on the other critical factors that are asked for in the JD. But if you have, let's say, 4 or 5 years of experience and there are other gaps versus the skill requirements on the JD, likely not, right? So it's a bit of a gray area, I would say, and you have to apply judgment. We have seen, though, by the way, the reason I say, that this is possible to get hired even if you don't meet the years of experience criteria, is because we have seen regularly many people getting hired who had slightly less experience or sometimes much more experience than what was on the JD, because that is one of the factors. It's not the driving factor for hiring decisions. Um, if the I think the wider the gap versus what the requirement is, the harder it is. But it's not impossible. I think the bigger question is, do you see good fitment on the skill requirements, on the experience requirements, on the achievements that they want you to be able to achieve for their company, right? So for example, you might have 7 years experience, companies asking for 10 plus years experience, but you have been able to create a digital product or maybe driven sales in the same exact manner that they are highlighting on the JD. If you've been able to do that, then it's worth applying despite the discrepancy in the work ex. Okay, great. I think we have come to a close for today's session. I really want to thank everybody, firstly, for being patient for the first 5 minutes when I did not know that you couldn't hear me. Thanks for highlighting that so that we could actually get this show on the road. And also, just for your patience to sit through this 1 hour session. People's attention spans are dropping drastically. So we understand sitting through a 1 hour session is not the easiest anymore. But because there are people out there who come to us, ask all of these questions regarding their career change, job search, career development, growing from IC to manager to leadership roles, we thought it would be helpful to folks in our community, and glad that you could join us today. I hope you got something that was uh, you know that was insightful and you can actually apply it in your career shift goals and see what happens. If you feel like it's helping you, continue with it. If you face some friction in the process, you can also reach out to me directly on LinkedIn, or you could reach out to us at Pivot. The profile, or sorry, the website profile is shared in my signature. It's um, mypivot.work. And with that, we can close this session today. Thank you again for joining. I hope you have a great rest.